The Way We Get By, a look into how we should define and measure poverty by Peyton, McCann, and Grayson Nelson. Poverty can't be defined by a single image or description. It isn't represented only by those lining up at soup kitchens or cutting burgers in half at McDonald's, despite those being realities for some people. The misconception of poverty being a state of starvation or living on the street barely cuts into what is a deeply nuanced issue facing millions in America and around the world. On the left, one sees all the top results for a Google search of the word poverty. These results outline the misconceptions and sometimes racial assumptions that can be associated with poverty, often perpetrated by representations in the media. On the right, the graphic shows a measure of the poverty rate as defined by the official poverty measure, or the OPM, and the supplemental poverty measure, or SPM. Not only will the average person on the street have a skewed conception of what living in poverty really means, but the government's measurement of income through the OPM is inadequate in truly representing the amount of people living in poverty. Alternative methods like the SPM are a step in the right direction, but still don't capture a reliable and realistic figure. We believe that poverty can be defined as a state of not having sufficient basic capabilities relative to those living in the same general community. Rather than just using income, the process of measuring poverty must factor in consumption of items that go towards basic capabilities in relation to the amount of income a household receives. Before determining which capabilities are required for a fulfilling life, we must look into what capabilities really are in the context of studying poverty. Economist and philosopher Amartya Sen defines capabilities as the well-being and advantage in terms of a person's ability to do valuable acts or reach a valuable state of being. In general terms, this means what a person is actually able to do or achieve based on either their social status or financial state. What capabilities are necessary for what Sen calls a valuable state of being? This is an issue that can be looked at subjectively, but Martha Nussbaum, a notable philosopher within this field, defines a list of 10 basic capabilities that are necessary in reaching the threshold of a valuable life. The 10 central capabilities are in plain wording as follows. Life, not dying prematurely. Bodily health, having good health, being adequately nourished, and having shelter. Bodily integrity, having mobility, being free from violence, and having choice in sex and reproduction. Senses, imagination, and thought, having access to education, religion, and art. Emotions, being able to have attachments and love. Practical reason, form conception of the good and planning of life. Affiliation, being able to have social interaction, respect, and dignity. Other species, concern in relation to animals, plants, and nature. Play, being able to laugh, play, and enjoy recreational activities. And lastly, control over one's environment. Political participation, being able to own property, and employment. The capabilities approach provides a comprehensive and personal approach to poverty that doesn't simply rely on income status and delves into the personal aspects of living a happy and healthy life. It respects one's dignity by not using hard numbers to quantify a threshold of poverty, and instead of forcing one to live a lifestyle, it gives them a choice to do it or not, hence capability. Despite being the preferred variable in measuring poverty, there are disadvantages to using the capabilities approach. The capabilities approach is very vague in that it is hard to measure capabilities. There is no money involved, and therefore it is difficult to quantify or give help to people in poverty. Another con to this approach is the imperialistic nature of the list of 10 that Nussbaum recognizes herself, but she believes it is more important to create a list than to leave one out. Why use capabilities in the definition? Capabilities are needed in the definition because they factor in aspects of life that cannot be measured monetarily but still hold significance in living a valuable life. Another aspect that must be dealt with in regards to using capabilities as the primary component of defining poverty is the standard of living within different communities and the relative measurement of capabilities within them. Sociology professor John Iceland elaborates on relativism in defining poverty in his book Poverty in America, a Handbook. Without explicitly mentioning capabilities themselves, Iceland refers to relative assessments of poverty as including exclusion from standards of living generally available to others in the same society. One can simply replace the word standards with central capabilities, creating a definition of poverty that both references the need for certain capabilities without ignoring relativity within a certain geographic area. For example, if one lives in a major city with advanced and widespread affordable public transit systems, their capability to travel to and from work would be much different than someone who lives in a rural setting and needs personal access to a car in order to get to their job. Standard of living is an important topic in relation to the discussion of relativism. Robert Rector, a research fellow at the Heritage Foundation, would argue that standards of living have increased to a point where rates of poverty are less severe than previously. Many households today are not in fact living in extreme poverty where they are without a home or frequently miss meals. Rector accurately notes how the public commonly has inaccurate assumptions on the current state of poverty and its severity. However, where Rector uses this information as a focal point of his argument, we believe that he misses important issues like social exclusion and lack of recreational activities in play and other capabilities that are not valued by a dollar amount or certain amenities. This is why we believe relativism is extremely important in today's poverty measurement, because although most people in poverty now have many amenities, this does not take into account how these amenities were gained or what state they are currently in. And in many societies today, certain amenities like access to the internet are needed or part of the rise in standard of living.
Now that we have determined that the definition of poverty primarily involves capabilities and the ability to reach a proficient standard of a certain community, the question that appears is in what way do we measure capabilities on a reliable scale? The answer lies in consumption statistics rather than income statistics. Income-based statistics used by the OPM tend to exclude the aspect of capabilities as well as true income such as in-kind benefits, near cash, and discretionary expenses. The supplemental poverty measure remedies the issue in measuring income by including the government assistance and discretionary expenses neglected by the OPM. Including these aspects tends to make the SPM produce higher rates of poverty than the OPM's results. The SPM takes a basic step into factoring in capabilities as well by including the 1.2 times the food, clothing, shelter, and utilities statistic, otherwise known as FCSU. But it is vague and leaves out essential capabilities necessary to a good life. Examples include healthcare expenses, recreational and play expenses, religious expenses, security, and others. What the SPM fails to cover is the depth of poverty in which those who meet the threshold deal with. Those who are classified as living an impoverished lifestyle are simply accounted for within the singular SPM calculation rather than put on a scale of how deeply lacking they are in certain capabilities. This can be fixed by calculating consumption on a scale that provides each household with a central capability consumption percentage, bringing the monetary measure of income while keeping capabilities in mind. This solution would be called Capability Consumption Poverty Measure, or the CCPM. The capability consumption-based method takes the percentage of income spent on the 10 central capabilities at the 33rd percentile community, then creates a percentage that should be spent on these 10 capabilities. For example, if the 33rd percentile community is spending an average of 75% of its $40,000 total consumption on the 10 central capabilities, then $30,000 would be the line one would need to have to live an adequate lifestyle full of the central capabilities in a similar situation. Benefits of the CCPM include that it accounts for the depth of poverty by being able to compare different percentages within the threshold of poverty, as well as accounting for household size through a percentage as well. A household with more children making the same amount as a household with less would have a higher percentage of consumption costs going towards the 10 central capabilities of the children. The CCPM also adjusts for different levels of purchasing power by using a percentage of income rather than just a dollar amount, which accounts for inflation in that the amount of income should be proportionate to the amount of expenses. Each philosopher brings valuable conclusions to the table in terms of either defining or measuring poverty, and we truly believe that it is possible for multiple of their ideas to coexist in a coherent system. By combining aspects of central capabilities and relativity with the SPM's method of income measurement, we believe it is possible to find a more fulfilling measure of poverty that can let hard statistics correspond with levels of capabilities through consumption.